Welcome to the Continuing Education Elective course, Beyond Boyd, Maneuver Warfare, Theory and Practice for the 21st Century. I am Shawn Callahan. I'm going to be your seminar facilitator, and I'm making this video as a way of trying to put a little bit of a personal touch on a course that could otherwise be a little bit impersonal when we have to deliver it through a distance education format. I've got a couple of ideas how we can mitigate that impersonality that I'll talk to in a few minutes. But first I want to give you a quick orientation to the rest of the course, why we're having it and how we're going to do it. So why does this course exist? Well, first let me tell you a little bit about myself. Yes, I am a retired Marine. While I was on active duty, I had a chance to teach a couple times, and I found that that was a pretty fulfilling thing for me. So when I retired from active duty, I managed to get a job in the College of Distance Education and Training at Marine Corps University. And it's really just a great place to be, and I enjoy it a whole lot. I guess I would say that I still view myself as a member of the profession at arms, even though I don't, or I'm not going to try and act like I'm an active duty Marine. I've just traded the warrior mentor role for more of a scholar mentor role. So my goal in this course is to share some information about something that's very dear to me, and hopefully something that intrigues everyone who signed up for the course. But also to grow along the way. That's one of the great things about teaching. So that's an orientation to me. Now the course itself, it is my contention, and I think the Commandant agreed with me when he came out with a program that essentially said we need to reinvigorate maneuver warfare throughout the Marine Corps. My specific contention is that Marines don't really understand our own doctrine. There's a knowledge gap that exists where we've read this relatively short publication that purports to offer all the answers, but really there's a lot deeper level of knowledge that we need to obtain if we're really going to get the most out of this text and say that we understand it. You know, anytime you're going to read some meaningful text, be it a great work of literature or theory or maybe even the Bible, in order to do that, you can only get so much by taking things at their face value, by reading the black and white words, right? If you really want to know what it's all about, then you've got to read about the historical context. You know, when was it written and why, and who were all the references to, and what were the people thinking about when they wrote this document. And then the second thing, of course, is also the philosophical or theoretical construct or context. Basically, how did people see the world at the time they wrote this, and what were they trying to do with it? So that is, in a nutshell, a big part of what we're going to do in this course. We had some conferences at Training Education Command meant to identify some of the obstacles that exist to making the Marine Corps more of a maneuverist organization, and this knowledge gap was one of the things that we identified. More or less coincidentally, at the same time, the College of Continuing Education was setting up an electives program, and we really realized that it would be a great opportunity to make some progress on this goal of increasing the resident level of knowledge with maneuver warfare. So CCE has several different level electives. There's the 4-lesson basically book studies. I think those are called general electives. And then there are some 8-lesson, they're called scholarly electives, and I think they're more collegiate level. And those are on specific topics, and they're taught by largely experts and professional scholars. I'll tell you that when we developed this, the director of CCE said, you know, this is really a step above those scholarly electives. So one of the things I want to make clear up front is if you've done some of those electives before, and I know some of you have, this is going to be a little more challenging. This is really graduate level education, and I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes as well. So essentially what we're doing here is we're building the 4-lesson warfighting book study, if you will, but we can't just have anybody teach that thing because we'll just be reading the black and white and not getting more out of it. So by completing this course, you should qualify as an instructor to teach that lower level warfighting course and help Marines get a better understanding of their own doctrine. And as the course goes on, I'll give you more specifics about how you can do that. I certainly encourage you to take the course just for its own sake and to get a better understanding of warfighting and maneuver warfare and the theories behind it. But if you're doing it also to help out your fellow Marines, then certainly we're going to help you with that process, because you can graduate the course with just a certificate saying you completed it, or you can graduate with an instructor certification, Or frankly, I think there's some talented folks out there that can probably wind up teaching this course themselves in the future. So we're looking forward to building the instructor base for this. This is not going to be my course. It's going to be a course taught by many people once we spread some of the details out and some of the we've got some more practice with it, I guess I should say. So let me talk about graduate education for a few minutes. It's going to be a little bit different than maybe some levels of education that you may have seen. Certainly, it should be very different from training if we're doing it right. And that's because we're not going to approach this that there's some body of knowledge we need you to read and understand and then just demonstrate that you understand it. The subject matter that we're going to give you is going to have a lot of subjective material in it, which means essentially there's no right answers. At the end of a long seminar discussing these things in great detail, we're free to have our own opinions. There's not going to be multiple choice quizzes or exams or anything like that, because that's just not the nature of this material. Now, in order to have these meaningful discussions about this subjective stuff, you're going to have to really grapple and get into some of the readings we assign, which kind of leads me to my next point, which is that we've timed the readings out so they should be accomplishable by the average reader within 4 hours. So 4 hours a week maximum is what we're expecting that you would spend on the preparation for our online or on-site seminars if we ever got to that point. So in order to answer these questions effectively, you're going to have to get in and do that reading. It's more or less impossible to have the kind of conversations we want to have if you're not familiar with the readings. You're going to be answering several questions, potentially online, over the course of a week. And I would urge you to try and get all the readings done before you start answering the questions, because many of the questions are synthetic. But I'll come more to that in a few minutes about the battle rhythm, if you will, for answering the different questions that we've got out there for you. They're called IFDs, or issues for discussion. So speaking of IFDs, it's a good idea to take a look at the IFDs before you do the readings. It'll help you cue in on some of the things that we're going to ask you to discuss. And to help you with this, there's a document that I put on the top level of Moodle there that summarizes the lesson objectives, the readings and viewings that are required for each lesson, and also the issues for discussion for each lesson. So you can kind of have those all in one document for reference. I should also mention that we've got our required readings and viewings. Those will be numbered on the left in white when you go to the Moodle pages. But on the right-hand side, you'll see there's an orange box full of suggested or supplementary readings and viewings. Those are nice to haves. Certainly I'll talk to you about a few of them and commend them to you for future reference. But if you ever want to view some of those or read some of those documents, then by all means dig into them and bring those into the discussion as well. But just remember, they're nice to haves, they're not requireds. Seminar participation, obviously, if you haven't picked that up, is really where you're going to do your learning in this course. I've heard it described that people who really become masters of material become masters not because other people have taught them, but because they've taught themselves with the assistance of other people. So masters teach themselves. And that requires it really to be your learning experience, and the only way to have it be your learning experience that you shape is for you to be involved in the seminar discussions. What do those mean? Making meaningful posts that you're reacting to other people's conversations online, or that we get in a forum like this and we can go face to face and talk over video or in person. You got to be an active participant in order for this to work out for you and for your classmates' sakes. If we do this right, that's where the real learning is going to happen, not in the reading, but in the discussion of the reading. So the culture of our seminar is going to be absolutely critical to fostering the right environment for that. What we want to create is a meritocracy of ideas, a forum where the strength of your ideas and your argument and the evidence you bring in is what determines the value that it's held at, the value with which the group holds it, rather than the person who's speaking it. So what I'm essentially saying is we're creating a rankless seminar. And actually, I'll say now, whether you're typing your answers or you're recording a video, let's try and keep rank out of this. So I'm going to ask you to refer to each other by first name, and if you record a video, please don't do that in uniform, or if you are, strip off your cami tops, you're just in your green t-shirt, or something like that, so we can get to know each other as Marines first name basis, and I think that will foster a healthier discussion. Because the idea here is it doesn't matter who says it. If somebody says something that doesn't sound right to you, including myself, we want you to challenge that and say, I follow what you're saying, but if I understand you right, then I disagree on point A, B, or C, and here's the reasons why. That's what's going to help all of us see this material from different perspectives and get a better understanding of it. So I'll ask you all to be engaged members of the seminar and to challenge each other on the strength of the ideas you're hearing expressed. All right, so let's talk about how we're going to do this. The default mode, look, we built this program so that this can be delivered asynchronously online, which means discussion boards. We can do it synchronously online, which means we actually get into video teleconferences essentially. Or if we were all located in the same geographic location, we could even do it on-site in a classroom. We use the same curriculum and the same supporting Moodle site for all three modes. Now the default mode is going to be online discussion, and I think that's what we're going to have to do with our first group here, because from what I hear, we're looking at folks that are going to be participating from Africa all the way through the west coast of the United States. So I suspect it's going to be really hard for us to get into an online forum we can see each other face to face, but I'll come back to that in a few seconds. So the default mode is going to be posting answers to the questions in our discussion boards. So the way that's going to work is I'm going to divide the group in half. I'll tell you which group you're in, and then each week there's going to be between 4 and 6 IFDs or questions you'll need to answer. One group will compose answers to the first 3 IFDs in the first half of the week, so basically by Wednesday midnight, while the other group composes initial responses to the second half of the questions. Then in the second half of the week, we're going to trade places so that the first group responds to the posts made on the latter questions by the other group, and the second group responds to the answers that were put down in the first 3 questions by the other group. And we want those second set of responses to be done by Saturday at midnight, so that you can all use Sunday either as a day of rest or a day of getting ahead in reading or whatever else you want to do. And then what I'll do is I'll post some sort of recap no later than noon on Mondays, so that you can see, I can highlight maybe some of the key learning points that I hope that we all saw in those conversations. So a couple things here. Remember, if we're doing this online, we're trying to replicate like an in-class discussion to the best of our abilities. So if you get into one of the discussion boards and you see the question there that was on the sheet, the IFD, but somebody's already composed 2 or 3 answers, don't just go in and say the same thing. Read what they wrote and react to it. We're trying to simulate an ongoing conversation. And I'm going to be involved in that conversation too, and I'll be directing it and ask you to elaborate on things, or maybe I'll just say, hey, we've heard enough of subject X, so what I'd like to hear more of is a little more on this particular aspect, okay? So if at some point I say to you, call you out by name, I don't mean calling out in a bad way, but just identifying you by name and ask you to elaborate on something, well then you owe me a response on that, or I should say you owe the group a response on that, because we want to hear more about that subject, some of those thoughts you had. So I think that's the basic ROE of the online posting. I'll express that in written words on an announcement as well. And if it seems confusing, we'll get through it the first week, and once you do it, it should become pretty obvious from there. Now, we also have an opportunity, if you don't like typing things out and you'd rather just like record what you want to say by video, just like I'm doing right now, then by all means, you can do that. In fact, Moodle has an app that you can put on your smartphone, and it's pretty easy to record video and post it that way to the discussion boards. I'm not the most tech-savvy guy, but I think it took me 3 or 4 minutes to figure it out and post a video. So a couple ROE items with that. Please compose like an outline beforehand so that you can get your ideas across efficiently. But at the same time, don't try and make these things too polished. We don't need to waste our time doing that. So in fact, this introduction I'm giving you right now could be a lot smoother if I spent a lot more time on it, but I'm not going to do that, because the ROE is going to be just take one take to get it right. If you screw it up, just recover and keep on going, and let's make this as close to a real discussion as possible and not waste our time trying to make it make it perfect. It's the content of the ideas, not necessarily the details of the presentation that we care about so much. So one take on your videos, and you can post those to the website so we can watch those instead of reading what you wrote, if that's what you prefer. And then, as I mentioned earlier, if we do manage after the first week and we get things rolling to identify a time that's convenient for all of us to meet and do the whole lesson in maybe like a 2-hour period by getting into a video teleconference, or maybe we divide the lesson in half and answer part of it online, and we do an hour-long discussion to answer the last half. We can do that as well. We've got some tools available, excuse me, like Adobe Connect and Google Hangouts, which can be pretty effective for that. And this is kind of the cutting edge of where we are in CDET, distance education, right now. So we can experiment with that and find something that works for us. So that's how we're going to do the course. So a quick overview of the course. If there is one overarching question that I would ask you to think about as this course goes on, and this is certainly something I'm going to help you develop through the course of our discussions, it is to challenge the notion that warfighting, MCDP1, equals maneuver warfare, and that is also exactly the theory developed by John Boyd. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about all three of those subjects, but I want to plant the seeds now to suggest that maybe those three things aren't exactly synonymous. Maybe there's an enormous amount of overlap between them. So the question that I hope you're going to be asking yourself before too long is exactly what is our foundational doctrine, or our core doctrine, warfighting? Is it really just maneuver warfare, or is it something more? So how are we going to get at that topic? Well, and also prepare you to be instructors. We've divided the course up, and by the way, this was developed not just by me, but by a team of people who are respected within the maneuver warfare community, if you will, people who know what they're talking about, and it's taken us about 9 months to build this thing. So we're really looking forward to seeing how well it goes and what your experience is going to be, but we think we've got something that'll be pretty meaningful. So part 1 is going to be lesson 1, and that's going to provide that historical context. You remember I said if you read a great book or something you want to get to know well, you got to know when it was written and why and what was going on at the time. Well, in that first lesson, we're going to focus on the question, why does the Marine Corps have FMFM1, which became MCDP1? What was the need that existed at the time, and where did these ideas come from? Then, in lessons 2 through 4, we're going to focus on the historical context. So one lesson on Sunza, one lesson on John Boyd's theories, and then one lesson that we're calling Beyond Boyd, because it goes into some ideas that have come about since Boyd passed away. And I'll tell you up front, I don't think they necessarily all merit the same weight in terms of their value to us, but we need to critically examine all of those. So you'll notice that I didn't mention Clausewitz, right? I'm actually a big fan of Clausewitz, but and I noticed that in one of your essays that you wrote to get into the course, somebody mentioned that they feel like this is fundamentally a Clausewitzian document, MCDP1. I'll tell you that General Gray said he feels that it's more Sunza than Clausewitz. And it's very easy to quote Clausewitz, but I will tell you that I think that if we can give you an opportunity to understand Sunza and Boyd a little bit more deeply, you're going to see that they're the ones who really came up with the core ideas that underlie the current doctrine. So once we do that, then we're going to spend a lesson critically re-examining the doctrine. We're going to read it, MCDP1, cover to cover, the whole thing, but we're not going to do it superficially. We're going to do it deeply, informed by all the things we've studied so far, and think carefully about what is in there and maybe what's not in there and what maybe should be in there. And we're going to have discussion about that. Okay, part 4 of the course is going to be lessons 6 through 8, and we're going to call this relevance and application. So how well is the Marine Corps making itself a maneuverist organization that it aspired to be back in the 1980s and 1990s? Who are our likely adversaries today and in the future, and how is warfare potentially going to change in the future? And how relevant will maneuver warfare or warfighting doctrine be in that environment? And then the other thing we're going to do here is spend some time doing some decision-forcing cases. That is because an argument has been made that the only way to really teach this stuff and get people to internalize it is to force them to make decisions through a variety of different tools, such as case studies or tactical decision games. So we're building the warfighting course, the lower level course, with some of those opportunities built in. And I've got to make sure that all of you get a chance to do these things and then think about if that's the right way to teach maneuver warfare, and also be prepared to do it. So don't worry about that too much right now. We'll get to that once we get the course off the ground. Just be aware that in the weeks we have decision forcing cases, we can do those in a asynchronous discussion board that we're going to try. And if we can get together, we can also do those synchronously through Google Hangouts or something like that. But on the weeks we do those, you only have 4 IFDs to answer instead of 6. So we've made that compromise to allow us to spend some time on those decision forcing cases. And again, I'll give you more on that later. So that's the and then the last part of the course, of course, is the evaluation. So we have a final exam. It's going to be another essay exam, and similar to the essay prompt we gave you at the beginning. And it's just a chance for you to show really what the big picture is that you've gained from the course. So that's that. So now that I've kind of covered a whole lot of details, I just want to leave you with 2 thoughts that deserve some emphasis. The first one is, please keep the lines of communication open by communicating regularly. That means, when we're doing our weekly discussion boards, get in there and actually participate in the discussions. That's absolutely critical. And especially if you find that you have other competing demands that are going to stop you from doing that, or force you to delay, then communicate with me so I can know that you need some more time to finish a particular lesson off, and I won't be holding up on the summaries or anything else because of that. And the other thing is, at some point, I'm going to stop you from digging a hole that's going to be one you can't get out of. So we'll just call the lesson complete, and we'll move on to the next one, because you can only get so far behind, especially with the kind of group that we're building here. And that kind of brings me to my last point, which is I really commend each and every one of you for signing up for this course. It's going to be challenging, but I think it says a lot to you, a lot about you, I should say, that you're embracing this opportunity in your quote-unquote off-duty time. It's not easy. I did all my PME the same way that you're kind of doing this course, by distance education, more or less, in my quote-unquote free time. And no, it wasn't easy, and I get that. And in fact, I'm doing this on my free time as well right now, too. So I totally get it if there are times that you're going to have to deal with other conflicts. Just communicate those with me. But again, my main point I'm trying to get to here is I really commend you all for signing up for the course. Embrace this opportunity, even though it might be challenging at times, because you're being put in a seminar with some really sharp folks, and that's a really rare opportunity. Embrace that so you can get the most out of it, and I think you will find it has some positive benefits for you on the backside. I know I'm really looking forward to this, because we've been preparing this for a while, and I know we're going to get some really good discussions going about some things that are important to me, and I'm pretty sure they're important to you as well. So I'm looking forward to it, and I'll post some guidance for lesson 1 as well, but I look forward to seeing you on our discussion boards, and hopefully maybe in some sort of synchronous online video teleconference at some point.